The Miami Floridians were the embodiment of the truly unique culture of the ABA, but like most teams in the league, they struggled to fill the seats, so they tried several ways to attract fans, including giving away free pantyhose, hosting a boxing match right after the game, and having ball girls that seemed to leave nothing for the imagination, as some say they were more popular than the players. But despite all these efforts, South Florida seemed to be indifferent to pro basketball, especially since the Dolphins were Super Bowl contenders. They even tried to become a regional franchise like the Cougars and Squires, but no matter where they played, the arenas were still empty. But the most interesting part is that the team didn't start off surrounded by endless beaches, sun, and palm trees. They began in the frigid landscape of Minnesota. They didn't last long as a franchise, but they did leave their mark as one of the more intriguing teams the league had to offer. Welcome to PG Hoops, and this is another episode of ABA Tales. The year was 1967, and when the ABA was formed, their first commissioner was NBA legend George Mikan. Since the league offices were based in Minnesota, it was only right that the team was placed there. They would go by the Muskies, which is a popular game fish, so Minnesota would have pro hoops for the first time since the Lakers relocated. George's former teammate Jim Pollard was the first head coach, and the Muskies didn't have any problems acquiring talented players. Les, Big Game Hunter, was an athletic forward that could score with ease. Donnie Freeman was another great scorer that seemed to never miss a mid-range shot. Virginia Tech's Ron Perry didn't have the most fanfare, but he was a great shooter that showed up in clutch situations. However, their biggest signing was New Mexico's Mel Daniels, a top 10 pick in the NBA draft who turned down a chance to play with a prime Oscar Robertson and take a gamble on the new league. With all this new talent, the Muskies emerged as one of the better teams in the league, as they were battling with the Pacers for the top spot in the Eastern Division. The Pacers started to lose a little bit more, so now the Pipers were Minnesota's competition for the number 1 seed. Mel, Les, and Donnie were all participants in the ABA's first All-Star game, but Mel really stood out, leading the league in rebounds and finishing 6th in scoring, placing 3rd in MVP voting and running away with the Rookie of the Year award. Sam Smith, Skip Thorne, and Irving Eniger were solid reserves, as the Muskies finished 50-28, second in the Eastern Division behind the Pipers. Their first playoff series was against the Colonels, and Mel carried, dropping 44 points and 15 rebounds in Game 1. Donnie dropped 30 points and 8 rebounds in Game 2, but Mel shot 4 for 19 as Kentucky tied the series. Les was the hero of Game 3 with 38 points, 21 rebounds, and 6 assists. The Muskies couldn't hit the side of a barn in Game 4, shooting 33% as a team, with Kentucky winning and forcing a do-or-die Game 5. Irvin surprised everyone with 33 points and 12 rebounds, as Minnesota won by 6 and advanced. It was only a matter of time before they matched up with Pittsburgh. Mel and Les combined for 76 points and 36 rebounds in Game 2, but this was their only win of the series, as the Pipers easily advanced in 5 games. The Muskies had a pretty successful debut season, but they struggled to put butts in the seats. They only had 100 season ticket holders, and while the ABA record book said they averaged 2,800 fans a game, these numbers are most likely padded. Even though the team lost over $400,000, they had plans to play home games in other cities in Minnesota to boost attendance, while a lucrative TV contract was in the works. But upper management decided that relocating was the best option. They moved to South Beach, now going by the Miami Floridians. But a certain someone wouldn't be joining them, as in order to pay the debts, Mel was sent to the Pacers for $100,000. In hindsight, this was one of the worst trades in ABA history. Donnie and Skip were college teammates, so their chemistry was always there. Don Seidel, Willie Morrell, and Maurice McCartley looked like solid pieces as well. But the sports writers weren't expecting much, as Miami wasn't a basketball hotbed at the time. But they still had some good turnouts, with 4,300 fans attending their debut against New Orleans, and 7,000 fans for a game against Rick Barry and the Oaks. The Floridians were off to a decent start, but their crowds continued to dwindle. The average attendance was about 3,200 fans, and nearly half of them were freebies. Miami had a large elderly population, so when the game started at 8 p.m., most of the residents were in bed. The Floridians didn't even get top priority at the Miami Beach Convention Center, as several games had to be rescheduled in favor of other sports like ice skating, boxing, wrestling, and even ping pong. They had to play at the local community college and at West Palm Beach. On the court, Don averaged 23 points and was 6th in MVP voting. Skip led the league in offensive rebounds, and Les had another all-star season. And Miami was good on both sides of the ball, finishing 43-35. They faced a team that replaced them in Minnesota, and this was a highly competitive series. In Game 7, Donnie, Willie, and Maurice combined to score 79 points, as Miami advanced in front of a home crowd of only 1,700 people. The Pacers met them in the division finals, as Mel Daniels, the player they gave away for nothing, had won the MVP and was now leading his team. Don Seidel really showed out in Game 4, with 27 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists, helping Miami finally get on the board. However, they would get blown out in Game 5 and eliminated. Despite the deep playoff run, the team continued to be in the red, as they lost over $300,000 this year. The owners were persistent in their fight to increase the attendance, and in 1969, they tried to appeal to the Cuban community in Miami by trading for Al Cueto, who was a local kid that played at Coral Gables High School. General manager Dennis Murphy offered him $100 a week at first, but when Al said he could make more money bagging groceries, Dennis wisely raised his offer to $15,000 a year. Even though Al was just an average player, the team promoted him like their superstar, calling him the world's tallest Cuban, a claim that wasn't true. Al was very popular with the Cuban population, so much that he had his own fan club, but front office meddling would derail this season, as the team essentially had 8 owners, and 2 of them, Sandy Rywell and Thomas Carney, began acting on their own. In October 1969, Sandy orchestrated a trade with the Pipers, acquiring Art Heyman for cash and a draft pick, but there was one problem. He didn't let Dennis, Coach Pollard, or the other owners know about the deal. He just stopped by the press table in the middle of the game and announced it to the journalists, totally blindsiding Murphy and Pollard, who said that the team already had enough players. Art was the first pick of the 1963 NBA draft, and he was a party animal, as he and his best friend Joe Namath would go out almost every night. Miami also signed former LaSalle star Larry Cannon, who was the 5th pick in the NBA draft. In order to coax him away from the major league, Miami offered him a $250,000 contract with a no-cut clause, but things soured quickly between Cannon and Coach Pollard. In an early season game, Larry was furious after Pollard pulled him after only 90 seconds. The two got into a shouting match, and when Larry kicked over a chair, Pollard told him that if he didn't like it, he could hit the showers. So Larry did. Walking off the floor and into the locker room, he grabbed his stuff and left the building. "I'm an All-American and they're treating me like a bum," Larry told the press. He claimed Pollard was messing up his game. Larry was fined $250, and he and Pollard eventually patched things up. Miami only won 5 of their first 20 games, so they replaced Pollard with Hal Brightman, an experienced coach who was last at Cheney State. He imposed a team curfew, something that didn't sit well with Art, who loved the nightlife. Once Art complained that the coach was treating them like children, he was the first player that Hal would cut once he took over. However, the season looked lost after Skip went down with a knee injury. Also, the owners continued to make trades without the input of anyone beneath them, as 22 different players suited up for them. Despite all the inconsistency, both Dons averaged over 20 points, but Miami was terrible, finishing 23-61. The team still struggled to turn a profit, so in one of the most egregious moments of cheapness ever, the team refused to put telephone service in their home office. Employees had to put a dime in a payphone to make calls. When a reporter finally got in contact with the team, GM Dennis Murphy laughed when the reporter suggested that they pay the phone bill. The Floridians also had the worst arena in the league, as the Dinner Key Auditorium was a dump. The converted airplane hangar was drafty, had broken windows, and no air conditioning. In Miami, put 1,000 people in there and it was literally a hot box. The doors had to be held open to let the breeze cool off the place, as the players had to adjust their jump shots accordingly. The running joke was that at the tip-off, there was a coin toss to see who would take the win. One night, the lights at the arena went out with 3 minutes left in the game against the Washington Capitals. Miami was clinging on to a 3-point lead when the lights blinked and buzzed for a second and then came back on very dim. When they were told it would take some time to get the lights back to normal, the coaches agreed to keep playing anyway. In near darkness, Miami blew the lead and lost to the Caps by 10 points. The team was sold to advertiser Ned Doyle in May 1970, as he paid $1 million for the transaction. Ned decided that the team would represent the whole state, dropping the Miami surname and just going by the Floridians, becoming a regional franchise and playing their games at 4 different locations. In order to shake things up, Ned essentially got rid of all the players, but he kept Coach Blitman, as their new marketing slogan read, "Instead of firing the coach, we fire the team." According to the Miami News, Hal's 8-year-old daughter came up with the idea. The Floridians brought in guys like Matt Calvin, Trooper Washington, Larry Jones, Warren Davis, and Ron Franz. Hal ran a fast-paced style that took advantage of his quick, high-scoring guards. The Floridians started the season 14-15, but they won just 4 of their next 23 games, as Blitman was fired and replaced with Bob Bass. Bob ran a slower-paced system, and the Floridians were cooking at the right time, winning 7 straight to make the playoffs with a 37-47 record. Larry and Matt combined for over 51 points a game, the highest mark for a backcourt ever, while Ira Harge had a career season. The Floridians faced Kentucky in the semifinals, but they would have to host their home games at Miami-Dade Junior College. After going down 0-2, Mack dropped 24 points and 12 assists in Game 3, and 34 points, 4 rebounds, and 10 assists in Game 4 to tie it up. Even though Mack was playing out of his mind, Larry couldn't find the range, shooting under 40% for the series, as the Colonels won in 6 games. Even with a playoff appearance, the team still couldn't draw any fans, as the financial problems remained. Several other players' paychecks bounced, but Mack had his own solution. "We would get our paychecks right before practice, so I would always fake an injury and run to the bank to get my money before the other players. Ned tried several methods to promote the team, as the gimmicks included go-go dancing competitions and free pantyhose for the first 500 ladies. Live turkeys were given away at Thanksgiving. 15 pounds of smoked fish went to one lucky fan, while another filled his trunk with 57 pounds of Irish potatoes. They hosted basketball and boxing doubleheaders featuring former heavyweight champ Jimmy Ellis. They even got Muhammad Ali to box some exhibition rounds, but half of the fans would leave once the fight was over. But the biggest attraction were the ball girls, who wore red, white, and blue bikinis with white boots. They stood behind the baseline and retrieved balls that flew out of bounds, and they would wiggle as a way to distract opposing foul shooters. As you might expect, the girls had to fight off several advances, as surprisingly, the referees were the worst offenders. But this was a clear sign of the times, as 2 of the girls were under 18. Despite all these tricks, the regional franchise experiment wasn't working, as PR manager Ken Small would say that Miami Beach was for tourists and 85-year-old women. Ned made another huge mistake in the summer, as he passed on a chance to sign Rick Barry, saying he wasn't a team player and he had bad knees. Warren Jabali joined the team in 1971, giving the Floridians a great all-around player, and they would need him, as Larry broke his hands and missed 19 straight games. The Floridians wanted to improve their defense, so they sent Ira to the Stars for many leaks, but he would last only 18 games before he left the team over a salary dispute. Warren was the best player, averaging 20 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists, all while making over 100 three-pointers. The Floridians' high-octane offensive attack was stifled by their porous defense, but 36-48 was enough for another playoff spot. They faced the Squires in the semifinals, but the convention center was booked for other events, as the staff didn't think the team would make the playoffs, so they were forced to play at the community college again. But with no real big men down low, the Doctor was unstoppable, averaging 38 points, 19 rebounds, and 7 assists on 59% shooting, including 39 points and 27 rebounds in the closeout Game 4. Since they only drew about 3,000 fans for their 2 home games, Ned decided that it was time to sell the team. After a deal to move to Cincinnati fell through in 1972, the team would be disbanded on June 13th. Pro hoops in Florida wouldn't return until 1988, when the NBA expanded, forming the Heat, followed by the Magic a year later. The Miami Floridians had unusual beginnings, as they started in the freezing cold in Minnesota, where they would achieve their most success. Once they moved to Miami, they were never short of talent, but inept ownership and financial struggles doomed them from the beginning. With the Dolphins being one of the best NFL teams at the time, very few people paid attention to the Floridians, as their arenas were often full of empty seats. They became a distant memory for a lot of fans in their short 4-year existence, but they embodied the sense of counterculture that the ABA stood for. Thank you guys, I really appreciate y'all for the support. I love making these videos, these kinds of videos, and I think when I was looking up some like Miami Floridians footage, and I would always see the ball girls, like that's how you can tell this is the ABA. Most of these teams were struggling to stay afloat. The amount of money it takes to run a professional team is astronomical, even back then. They were a good team, but I feel like they were just there. Like they were a team that was just there. It's kind of like the Hornets, like Charlotte Hornets of the NBA. I know I just threw a wild stray. Like at their best, they might give you a semifinal run, but most likely they're not going to make the playoffs. But if they do, they're going to get out in the first round. Like that middle of the pack team that's not a cellar dweller, but they're not like a championship contender type of team. I think when I used to watch the Heat back when LeBron was playing on the Heat, and now they would have those jerseys, like those white jerseys with the stripes. I'm like, man, those jerseys are fire. And like, I didn't know that those were the ABA jerseys, that they were paying homage. But shout out to y'all. I really appreciate y'all for the support. Leave a like if you enjoyed, that subscribe if you're to my channel. Turn on my post notification if you haven't already. Thank you. Please be safe. Stay on the grind. I'm out. Peace.